Mr. Esposito.
Thank you again, Mr. President. When the executive budget was submitted to this body on October 20th, it included, among other things, $2.2 million of interest payments for revenue anticipation notes that are typically issued to help the county with its end-of-year cash flow. This estimate was based upon interest rates received in previous years, notably last year when we received a 6% interest rate for that borrowing. The week following the submission of the executive proposal, the county issued 2 revenue anticipation notes for the general fund and hospital fund for approximately $75 million. To our great fortune, we were able to take advantage of historically low interest rates due to the poor economy and received a 1.9% rate. As publicized in the following days, this rate was able to save the county more than $1.5 million due to the fact that the interest payments due in April of 2010 will only be about $650,000 and not the $2.2 million budgeted. At last week's Ways and Means Committee meeting, when asked about this issue, Finance Director Adair indicated the unused budget amount might be needed for unforeseen additional short-term borrowing during the course of 2010, especially in the event that a second revenue anticipation note is needed because of delayed payments from New York State, who is suffering from their own cash flow problems. Recognizing that Governor Patterson has stated publicly that he is likely to delay more payments from the state, we think it's wise to allow for this sort of likelihood and the need for a potential second round of short-term borrowing. However, if and when additional short-term borrowing is needed to help the county's cash flow, until property tax collections start at the beginning of next year, it will be nowhere near the $1.5 million budgeted. Therefore, rather than hoarding this money, I believe we should correct the overestimated interest payments in the budget and reduce the tax levy and tax rate accordingly so property taxpayers of this county can benefit from the savings provided by these historically low interest rates in these tough economic times. At this time, I'd like to move an amendment to the budget for the purpose of reducing this estimated, or this appropriation. Specifically, I move to decrease the following lines in the budget. These appropriations, account number 6262-506120, will be decreased by $327,500. Account number 12-1290-509070 will be decreased by the same amount. Account number 12-1290-506120 will be decreased by $1,168,500, and the corresponding revenues in line items 62-62-412,000 and 12-1209-400,000 will also be decreased by these same amounts. This would allow a $1,496,000 decrease in the property tax levy, corresponding to a 4-cent decrease in the property tax rate. This, I'd like to have a second at this time.
I'll second that.
Mr. Briscoe?
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple of clarifications on this. Through you to the administration, Mr. Adair, could you clarify for me where the $1.496 million is coming from?
Mr. President, I apologize. Could you repeat the question for me?
Could you clarify for me where the $1.496 million is coming from?
Through the President, in this amendment, the way I'm reading it, the 1.496 is coming from the unallocated area of the Finance Department's budget to provide for a lowering appropriation from the RAN interest. The revenue anticipation note interest payment, yes, we were successful in the marketplace in October to be able to obtain a lower rate than we were last year. At the point in time when we did that, we had no clear view of what was going on at the state level regarding their cash flow issues. So at the point when we borrowed the $75 million for the general fund and the hospital fund, we did not include any ability to pay for the delays that we're experiencing today from the state of New York. So in case the delays continue, depending on the state's financial situation and what they decide to do, we may in fact need to do another revenue anticipation note borrowing in the early part of 2010. That would be in addition to the historical October-November timeframe borrowing that we do. And this appropriation, the 1.496 and the $327,000 from the hospital, we have no idea at this point in time what interest rate would be associated with that second borrowing. That second borrowing, the critical point here is, at this point in time, when we borrow these revenue anticipation notes for state and federal monies that are due to us, nothing to do with the tax levy, nothing to do with taxes, they do not back this revenue anticipation note. This revenue anticipation note, because of what's going on with the state, we anticipate would be an extremely high interest rate. When the rating agencies and when the underwriters and the buyers of these notes look at this, they look at the fiscal stability of the organization that you're actually borrowing on the back of. And at this point in time with these revenue anticipation notes, we are borrowing on the back of the state's credit rating and the state's creditworthiness along with the federal government. At this point in time, it would be impossible for me to say to you that our borrowing for state cash flow issues would not be double what it was in 2008 when we reached that 6% high. And I think it would be remiss of me to say to you that this appropriation is not necessary to keep the county on solid financial footing for the 2010 budget.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, would you say you still have no clear vision of where the state is going?
Through the President, the only clear vision that I've received from them is additional bad news in the fact that there are other reimbursements besides some of the ones that you've already read about in the newspaper, being the EI and ECD program being delayed, as well as some Department of Transportation payments we're being made aware of as recently as this week that could be delayed as we move forward due to the state's cash flow issues.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, you would then categorize this as a very risky move to take this money, reallocate it?
Through the President, based on the financial condition of the state, at the present time, yes, I would consider this to be a very risky move for us to remove this appropriation from the 2010 budget.
Thank you. Just for clarification, the three accounts that you have the paper in front of you, Mr. President, these three accounts, what are they?
Through the President, I'll do my best to try and do that off the top of my head. The account 62. Through the President, the account 6262 is an appropriation in the hospital fund for $327,000 for the rate interest, and the two in the general fund are both in the finance department in the unallocated area. Specific line items or the names of those line items I do not know at this present time.
Yeah, but we have a consensus on that. We don't know either. But Mr. President, certainly I can admire an attempt to cut the tax rate, and nothing would make me happier at my last meeting to be able to vote for a tax decrease. But I think it's unconscionable to take the kind of risk that the Chief Financial Officer is outlining at this point, so I'll be opposing this.
Further discussion? Mr. Haynes.
Mr. President, I'd only point out two factors in support of Mr. Esposito's amendment. One is that this amendment does not wipe out the entire unused portion of the appropriation that is in these accounts for the payment of interest on revenue anticipation notes. Because indeed we've anticipated that it may be necessary to issue more revenue anticipation notes. But I would point out that according to the bond buyer, which is the newspaper of the bond industry, interest rates have actually dropped marginally since we sold the revenue anticipation note in October, so that we can anticipate that the interest rate we would pay now would be less than what was paid in October. And secondly, since that note, if necessary, would not be issued until sometime in January